Hello, welcome to this edition of the Academy. If you find these videos are actually helping you out or giving you some different insights, please do not forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment below. Let me know, what you're getting out of these. I want to make sure I'm helping you guys out. Today, I'm going to talk about spam, spam throughout history. And I don't mean the meat, though that has been used by a few different militaries as rations. We're talking about the concept of using an overwhelming number of a particularly effective unit, almost to the exclusion of all else, to try to obviously win. It actually unbalances the game. Now, it's kind of like making the fair fight unfair, in a certain sense. But I wanted to cover some things because there's some emotional reaction that usually happens with spam, even when the word spam is mentioned. So, to give you for those of you who may not be clear exactly what I'm talking about, I'm going to talk about things. You may have heard the terms, like venom spam or jet bike spam, scat packs. There's Flyrant spam. That's what Tyranids. You can just as many flying hive tyrants as you can get on the board in a legal list. And Vendetta spam, the Imperial Guard flyer with triple las cannon, twin linked, really any flyer spam, putting a lot of flyers on the table. Now, in all honesty, though, this is something we should get used to. There's actually, you see this a lot in military history. If you go back far enough, think about the time of Philip the Great, Alexander the Great. Philip was his father. They developed the Macedonian phalanx, which is a block, literally a square of pikemen, 20-foot long spikes, several ranks deep. The first three ranks are leveled. The spear points out in front of the front line, and then the next two, actually several ranks behind them, each with a slightly elevated pike behind that. When those were put on the battlefield, that is really almost all that the Macedonians used. They didn't have the other heavy infantry types. That was their unit. Now they included some cavalry and some skirmishers, some archers or slingers, but by and large the force was primarily phalanxes. It's called phalanx spam, and it was effective. It allowed them to conquer the world, or the known world. Greece fell, Persia fell. He made it all the way to India, down into what is now Syria, Egypt, Saudi Arabia. All of that with one type of infantry unit. Yes, he had his companions, which were a very, very small, numerically small horsemen, elite horsemen, but the bulk of the force was this phalanx spam, and that for centuries dominated the battlefield. It wasn't until the Romans came up with their system and found a way to neutralize it. Now, fast forward several centuries, a couple millennium, and you end up with the Mongols. Their hordes, as they're moving through the steppes of Asia Minor and Russia and all that, Eastern Europe, almost their entire force was cavalry. Not all of it, most of it. They did have infantrymen, but most of it was horse. Now, 60% of their army were archers, horse archers. So here we are, horse archer spam. A large contingent of the remaining cavalry was the heavy cavalry, and what they were able to do with those horsemen was to charge forward within bow range. Now these are short horse bows, so they weren't the ranges we consider normally when you think in terms of battle of Agincourt, what have you. But still, they were effective at quickly getting in, loosing arrows, and getting out of town. That way they could continually wear down the enemy and disrupt them, attack them from many sides, circle around, attack from one side, retreat, come around the other side, and multiple units coming at different directions. It's hard to defend against arrows coming in from 2 or 3 different directions when you only have a shield that can only face in one direction. So it was very effective whittling them down. Once the enemy was whittled down enough and disrupted, that's when the heavy cavalry would charge in. It really wasn't until, a couple centuries later when the Europeans began to get a more disciplined army and devise some tactics, even some simple counters to that. One of the best counters was to finally put the longbow in, which could outrange the horse archer's bow, or very effectively introduce the crossbow and pavise. That's a P-A-V-I-S-E. That's how you spell it. It's a very large. Think of it as a huge door. It's a wood slab. Actually, it's several boards. 6 foot to 8 foot tall, 4 foot or so wide, and it was built on frame that he'd have an individual would carry that forward, and that would be put in front of, and he would stand in front of the crossbowman. Crossbowman could then step out to the side, fire, go back under cover of the pavise, and reload. Step out, fire. There's no way the horse archers could deal with that. So now all of a sudden you got a counter to it. But those horse archers did phenomenally for centuries. Now let's fast forward all the way to 20th century. And a good example of spam that was extremely effective is machine gun spam. Now we see in movies everybody's got a machine gun when they're fighting, but in 1940, I'll compare the U.S. Army to the German Wehrmacht. The U.S. Army had absolutely no machine guns at the squad level. In fact, the machine guns were issued at the company level. Those are 30 calibers. They had a couple 50s, but those were anti-aircraft mounts, so not the heavy machine guns you're usually thinking about. So, a squad of 10 men, they had an automatic rifle, which, okay, that could shoot pretty fast. It could go in auto fire, rapid fire, fully automatic basically. But it only had a 20-round magazine. Now, very effective, infantry units. It developed out of the World War I and the experiences and theories following that. So you had a lot of hitting power from that. However, the Germans took it up a notch. They actually developed their infantry platoon around an infantry squad that was a machine gun with its 2 loaders, basically a loader, assistant gunner, and a loader. And those 3 guys were the center of the squad. You had the sergeant, and then you had essentially 6 other riflemen. Their job was to protect the machine gunner. So you had a squad of 10 men with a machine gun that could put down 1,000 rounds a minute on a 250 round belt. So you're talking 15-20 seconds of sustained fire compared to the 2 seconds that the Browning automatic rifle and the U.S. squad could put out. That's a lot of suppressive fire, a lot of mowing down capability. So a platoon would have 3 of those. And of course, the company then would have its heavier versions of machine guns, which essentially were configured so they can fire even more rapidly. So in the end, 1940 on, the German Wehrmacht was a machine gun spam infantry army, and it was extremely effective. Now, as a result, no other European armies were configured that way, and so they were struggling against that when it was infantry versus infantry. You had to bring up some heavy guns to deal with those machine guns. In the U.S., they couldn't compete with that. The light machine gun, infantry machine gun, which was a 30 caliber, was not as portable as the MG42, and it was not issued to each squad, so they couldn't lay down the return fire. The result is the U.S. had to figure out a way to defeat those machine gun nests before they get mowed down. So there was a lot of development of tactics and really outflanking. You distract the gunners, get them to fire in one particular direction, send a couple guys or part of a squad, a team out around the side, picking their way through cover, and then finally open up on the machine gunner from an unprotected flank. But throughout the entire war, the Germans had machine gun spam. Very, very useful, very effective. The last one I'm going to bring up is in 1944 and 1945, on the Allies side, it was flyer spam. The Germans were basically had no control of the air at all. British Typhoons, especially, they were supported by some P-38s, P-51s, and P-47 Thunderbolts. But the Typhoons and Tempests would just rain rocketry down on all the tanks, and they would just decimate tank columns. So the Germans had to move by night. Now, when you're trying to go against an opponent and trying to outmaneuver them, if you can only move at night, you're basically hamstrung. Okay, now during the Battle of the Bulge and some of the later January or early January fighting, and I think it was actually even through the winter, so into March even, the only time the Germans were able to really mount offensive actions of any merit were when it was overcast and the flyers just could not get up and provide that air support. So the tanks could finally come out, but as soon as that the air cover or cloud cover broke, the flyers came down, and those flyers would just take out the tanks left and right. Very effective. There was no way the Germans could stop them. They just did not have enough anti-aircraft to fight it. So flyer spam was used by the Allies during World War II. So why do we bring that up? Well, it's very simple. It's a reality. It's a historical reality. It's a combat reality. It's what a good general will do. Now, in the game, the fact is there's really a lot of drawbacks to that, to spam. Now, not for the beginner. So the points I'm going to cover right now about the drawbacks of spam are not to be thought of as to be applied to a beginner. Spam is actually very good for a beginner because it forces them to use fewer units to really master those and understand that unit better, and then he can slowly add new units. But in general, think about these things when you are considering building out a spam list. If you use or relying only on your most effective or most efficient units in your codex, you actually are limiting yourself quite a bit. First of all, your opponent, especially if it's a repeat opponent, people around your gaming club or your friends or your local game store where you happen to be, they will pick up on how you build your lists, and they're going to bring the rock that's going to take out your scissors. There's just no way around that. Remember, every unit has a weakness. No matter what it is, it's always got a weakness. And there's always a rock to go against that scissors. Okay. So you're eventually going to run up against that list that's perfectly designed to beat you, because all you do is use the same spam. People get used to it. They have to build lists knowing you're coming, and they're going to take care of that. The more important problem from my perspective is you stop learning. You focus on developing your tactics around this one list, and you really prevent yourself from looking at all the other options in your codex and the possible synergies and areas where a particular unit might be more advantageous than what you're bringing. You lose out on all that opportunity of learning and planning and maybe even finding a more creative list to address some of the other challenges you're finding in your meta. The next thing is it limits your ability to learn different tactics. I'm going to put it in this way. If you take an infantry general and you promote him to lead a corps, and the corps includes both armor and infantry, he is not going to be very knowledgeable about how to engage the enemy with armored formations. So he's not going to be as effective as he could be. If that infantry general had moved through the armor ranks as well, even if it was in a staff position, he'd learn how to work within an armored formation, what the tactics are there, the logistical issues, the various things that make a formation work in the armored sense. He'd be much better, more capable at that corps level. So that general, who's not well fitted, not well rounded, will end up squandering the units that he's not really good with. Why bring units if you're not going to use them or know how to use them well? So just a thought there for you. One of the things that I particularly like is, I'm very competitive by nature. I try not to get into tournaments because I tend to almost change personality. I like to enjoy. I like to have fun. I do like to win. I like to win a lot. But I also like role-playing games and stuff. So I like the story. I really love the aspect of Warhammer, especially, where you build a story and you can actually watch the battle unfold, and then some small stories come up, like that one, infantryman that standing against all odds against the overwhelming firepower. He just can't fail to save. That's a story in there. When you try to build a list that models after some other lists, real formations in the military. For example, the Long Range Reconnaissance Patrol, lightly armored, no vehicles, they carry all equipment with them. It's all infantry. How would you think about how you'd fight that, or how you would fight with that? It may not be of interest to you, but if you're interested in fighting an infantry type army like that, and you want to take that approach, where they're kind of going through unsupported by tanks and air cover, but they're just trying to dish out what they can, strike key targets on the opponent's backfield or what have you. You won't build lists to do that if you're just going with the spam approach. So if you like narratives, the spamming kind of thing is going to really, cause you to not build lists that'll actually drive a good story. And to me, that's just something that I care about. So I don't know if you guys care about it or not, but just something I wanted to point out. The final thing about that is sometimes your opponent is trying to run a fluffy list and wants to do that, but the spam you bring is just so overpowering. It kind of makes it almost one-sided, and the game is a lot less fun for both of you. So always think about the dynamics within the game. Now, if your opponent's okay with it, he doesn't mind you running those lists and still will have fun, even though their lists are kind of fluffy and maybe poorly matched. I personally love to fight unbalanced matches, especially when I'm the underdog, because it really tests my ability to adapt and respond and really use some of the tactical concepts that I'm actually trying to convey in this Academy series. So, now having said all that, though, the reality is you should accept spam. Like I said, it is a military fact. There are times it's very good to use, but now we have to balance this. What you may consider spam may actually not be spam. So here's what I'm saying now. If you build a list that is almost entirely we'll just use the Eldar. It's all scatter laser jet bikes, very powerful, tons of shots, several units because you only have 10 bikes per. So that's 30 bikes. That's actually 120 shots just for those three, and that gets you a total of, I can't do the math, 150, 180 points times 3. So 400 points. You got this huge spam list already. Okay. If all you do is keep adding, all 6 troop choices filled out for the max, add more, shining spears in there with your fast attack, your autarchs on a jet bike, your warlock and farseer, everything's on a jet bike. That's going too far. If, however, you do build larger units with these spam type of formations or units, make sure you've got other aspects of your army covered. Remember, one unit can only deal with a small number of threats effectively, which leaves a lot of other threats out there difficult for you to handle. For example, scat jet bikes, or scat packs, they're not going to do well against Leman Russ. Just ain't going to happen. So you have to be able to make sure your units somewhere can handle flyers, can handle terminators, can handle infiltrators, outflankers, deep strikers, vehicles of all types. So build the spam type units, but make them as a part of your more balanced force. That is how you want to do this. The Allies, I'll go back to the last example. Allies did not just use air cover and just go and take it off targets. They always were supporting infantry and armor. So it was ground support. So in that, if you're to look at a 4-hammer list, you're going to have your infantry, your tanks, and you're going to have air cover. Okay? Yeah, sure, maybe there's 4 flyers, but still, there's all the other stuff there too. It's not just a list of all flyers, right? So now another aspect is, some armies are very fluffy in a spam context. What would a White Scars list be like if it was just almost all bikes? Same thing with Raven Wing. And the Eldar, if you run Samain, or however you pronounce it, I've heard it Salon or Samain, either way, that is a jet bike army, okay? some grav support in the back as far as grav tanks, but I mean it's jet bikes and Vipers, and it's just that's all it is. So I'm not saying spam is always bad. It can be part of a fluffy list. Go for that, okay? But now remember, you should identify the opportunities where you can incorporate that in your own army to balance your list. Make some very effective units, because spam is effective and it's militarily wise. And then if you want to think about, understand the key here is you need to understand the opponent's weakness. So when they put a spam list down, spam list together, study them. Study the different spam out there on the web. Look at the different blogs. Look at the different articles in the forums. Look at battle reps. Think about what was taking those units out. Venom spam is tons of shots, 20 or 12 shots per venom. You can easily flood it with 11 to 14 venoms. It's a lot of DACA coming out, but they only have 2 hull points. Ignores cover, will avoid any jinx. Now they still have a 5-up invuln save, but they're open top. They pop easy. They're fragile. A lot of fire, even from bolters, will take them down. So everything has a weakness. Figure out what those weaknesses are. Accept the fact spam is out there and use that to your advantage. Build it into your lists where it complements your other already balanced army, and then identify it where your opponent's using it. Figure out how to counter it, and then go after them with no mercy. All right? See you in the next academy. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.